Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 27 of the Tesla Life for November 1, 2017. I am your host. My name is Russell Frost. Thank you very much for joining us. And luckily for you, we have an exceptionally cool show today. Not only do I have two of my favorite Tesla Life panelists with me, who I'll introduce in just a moment, we have a special guest who I'll introduce sadly after I introduce the regular guys. So let's get them out of the way. That didn't sound very respectful.
Man, you suck.
Wow. I'm kind of mean today. This is mean Russell. So my apologies, but thanks for tuning in. The man next to me in the bright red sweatshirt and the bright red t-shirt, he obviously hates red. Our man in the wonderful Kitchener-Waterloo area, Mr. Mark Coughlin.
I'm either that or I'm colorblind, one or the other. So welcome to the show, everybody. Looking forward to some interesting news and our special guest. So we'll just move along to the next panelist.
We absolutely will. And next to him, at least on my screen, maybe it's not on yours, is our man in Chicago. While he doesn't drive a Tesla, he will someday. I feel sure. Yep. Yes. That was confusing, Tony. That was almost passive-aggressive. His name is Tony Schaefer.
Well, it might not be mine, is the thing. Oh. And it might not be for long. But I will drive that Tesla.
Do they allow shows from prison?
I don't. Would this qualify as a conjugal visit?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave off on that one. And finally, our very special guest, and we are very glad to have him with us. He is the co-host of the Model 3 car owners or Model 3 enthusiasts show. His name is Ken Bokor.
Hello, and thank you. Yeah, it's a Model 3 Owners Club. You're almost there, but we got it. There'll be a test at the end. Don't worry.
I know. It's like bad move, right?
Thank you very much for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks very much for coming on. You guys just did a really cool in-depth video on the Model 3 because you got one. And as we mentioned before the show, somehow you're not in jail yet.
Not yet, but I keep looking behind my back and if the doorbell rings while we're on this podcast and I have to leave in a hurry, you'll know why.
I'm going to grab my phone and call the Tesla Life show attorneys if anything happens. So feel free. Say as you will. You know what? I don't even know where to start. Ken, where should we start on the Model 3s?
Well, listen, we're extremely pleased to have had the ability to get access to early production Model 3. And spend some time with it and provide our viewers and just everybody who's interested in this stuff a pretty in-depth overview. Not a review, because some reviews have been done, but certainly an in-depth overview of the features and functions of the Model 3, because there's a lot of them.
And Ken, did you this obviously isn't Tesla sanctioned, correct? Like they did not provide you with the Model 3.
Correct.
Tesla themselves.
Tesla corporate did not provide us. They haven't provided anybody with a Model 3, to our knowledge, other than what you saw at the launch event, where
they drove one to see Motor Trend or something.
Yeah,
right?
Motor Trend did one, and I think Fred from Electric had a quick spin, and then the guy, and I forget his initials now, who won the video contest.
Okay.
That guy who's got a big YouTube following, he got time to spend in a Model 3 as well.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But Trevor and I just got a ride along when we were down at the launch event with everybody else.
Yeah. All right.
About 5 minutes, yeah.
So are we allowed to ask you where you got this car?
No, you're not.
Fair enough.
We're allowed to ask, you're not allowed to answer.
Somewhere in the world.
Somewhere in the world, you managed to get access. So,
yes.
Okay, so my question is, what's the thing that's really stuck with you in your time with this vehicle? The one, is there any one thing that jumped out that you didn't expect?
It's a great question. I was a little skeptical, again, only having a 5-minute drive along, looking at all the features and benefits, looking at the pricing for that versus, what, especially in Canada, what we're looking at from a luxury car perspective, and are we going to get, the bang for the dollar? And I was pleasantly surprised in that in getting that feeling after spending some time with the Model 3. It definitely is a car that's going to please a lot of people. We are still, and I've mentioned this on some previous blogs since then, people, kind of comparing the features versus, well, in a 3 Series I get this, and a C-Class I get this, and so forth. We have to remember, folks, we still are paying a premium for electrification, and cost parity is not there yet. Hopefully, maybe within 5 to 7 to 10 years, I think it's going to be closer to 5. We'll start seeing that, but there is a bit of a kick to get into electrification, especially full electrification, as in a battery electric vehicle like the Model 3 is. So there are going to be some features, or just probably some takeaways that you would think would probably be there, like they would be on a 3 Series or a C-Class or something like that. But for all intents and purposes, I was pleasantly surprised with the car. I kind of went in with a little bit of a negative viewpoint and came out very positive.
So
Nice.
Is it fair though? I mean, we talk, those of us that have been in this alt car thing for a long time have heard that constant refrain. Well, that same money would get you something else in this.
Yes.
Is that really a legitimate standard? You know what I mean? Comparing apples to oranges and going, this apple doesn't have as many features as this orange.
Yeah, I don't think it is a fair comparison, because we are talking about two different modes of transportation, in the fact that we've got 100 years of ICE technology out there. And yes, even though battery technology was invented before battery cars, actually electric vehicles were invented before ICE vehicles in the latter part of the 1800s. Maybe a lot of viewers don't know that. But obviously, it just didn't sustain. It's kind of like the beta VHS argument, and VHS won out. I still have my beta in the basement somewhere. VHS won out, and ICE won out, and the rest is history. So they got 100 years on us to be able to build and do a lot of things there, whereas electrification is still catching up. So Elon, in Tesla, like to provide a lot of features, and the uniqueness with them is that they can do it through a lot of software elements and updates. So, a Tesla, as an example, has a unique competitive advantage because it gets better with age. And that's more in a feature functionality versus maybe a depreciation. All cars depreciate for the most part, but, an owner of a 2014 S will probably have more features and functions today than they did when they purchased the car in 2014. So that's part of the unique value add that Tesla brings. So you're right, Russell. It's not exactly a fair comparison to say, well, the 3 Series has this, the C-Class has this, the A4 has this, and so forth. Even though that's the market that Tesla is going after with the Model 3, there are some things that you're not going to get that you would think you would have in a car at that same price point. And that's because the technology still hasn't come down enough in price to make it cost parity. When that happens, then yeah, I think then you have a fair argument to do. That makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I'm going to just end, at least for the moment, with this. There's a dreadful Chevy commercial on television right now, I think for the Equinox. Stack. They the one I'm talking about.
I think so.
Like 6 other competitive SUVs, a Lexus, and all this stuff. And they go, this one Chevy has more features than all of those cars put together. And all I can't get out of my head is it's still a Chevy.
Right.
And would I rather have the Lexus? Well, you know what? If it doesn't have like automatic self-tinting rear view mirrors, yeah, I'll probably put up with that. Right. Because I'm in a Lexus. And I think Tesla, that's the argument with Tesla, is that, yeah, that competitiveness is important to a point, but you can also overdo it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can go on a features list till you're blue in the face with a lot of cars and compare them. But as I get a lot of people that ask me, what should I do? And I tell them, well, look at electrification for your needs. It may not be for a lot of people. There are guys and gals that drive, hundreds of miles a day for work or whatever, and an EV is not going to cut it for them. But for somebody who can get into that market, then look at what's available out there and look at all the options and explore those. And we're not, yes, we are fans of Tesla. I mean, the show is anchored around the Model 3, but we've grown the show in the state that We don't just focus on Tesla. We cover the Model 3 as a core. We talk about Tesla, but we also cover what's going on around the world. And there's a lot of stuff. I mean, Mark, you know a lot of this, doing some public events that we've been fortunate to do together. That there's a lot of people that really are coming out. Hey, I heard about this going on in Europe, and I heard about this in other parts of the world. Electrification is really taking off, and we try to report and discuss that, as well as what other manufacturers are doing. So we reviewed an i3. We reviewed an e-Golf. We've looked at other electrics out there, the Leaf and things like that, because they are valid cars.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
I'm
go ahead. Go ahead, Tony.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I was going to just say that the comparison of the Model 3 to other cars, but however, there might be people saying, well, I want to get a Model 3 because it's a Tesla, and the Model S has all these really cool things. So in your Tesla experience, the Model 3, is it a stripped down Model S? How are they reaching the price point? What compensations does the buyer of a Model 3 have to make that they're not going to get on the Model S if they spend twice as much?
Right. I don't have all the features to memory, committed to memory on a Model S.
That's it.
That's it. See you later. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Click. But sir, I mean, just in listening to the quarterly call, which we'll talk a little bit about later on, just before jumping on with you guys, I mean, even Elon mentioned that they've added more features to the S so that they could up the price on that S to further differentiate the value between the S and the Model 3. Because as we know, early on, there was a lot of conjecture and conversations about, the Model 3 is going to eat into the Model S because really it's almost the same. Tony, there's a lot of features that you get in the Model 3 that you get in the S. It's a little smaller car. It's a little shorter, a little narrower. So it does fit a intermediate, or I guess the compact to intermediate size class versus a full size class that the S plays in from a sedan perspective. So you have the physicality aspect of it. You have the differentiation in the dual screen format, currently a browser, and then some other features that are available. I would argue, obviously, some bigger motors, so it's going to be a faster get up and go for those people that like it. But the Model 3 being 1,000 pounds lighter with with the newer motors is pretty quick as well. We don't have firm 0 to 60s, but from what Elon stated, around 5 seconds, I don't think that's something that is not achievable. In fact, it certainly felt pretty quick when we took it out. So there are some trade-offs in size. There are some potential trade-offs in some of those speed elements. Again, there's some other features that larger interiors and some more appointments that the S may have that the 3 doesn't.
So does the 3 like to cut costs? Does it have like hand crank windows and I don't know. I'm trying to think of like
little squirrels that run a treadmill.
Right. Well, now that's the range extender version.
Yeah, that's
right. I understand.
2 squirrels versus 1. No, it's pretty well appointed, and it's one of the things we show in that in-depth video is just kind of go through it with a fine-tooth comb to show people, the materials are pretty good. There might be better material options available for the S, but in the premium Model 3, it's a pretty decent material. Tesla's still doing their own seats, so Trevor's pointed out that they still aren't 100% there, but we have to remember that we're talking about a company that's only been making cars, take the Roadster out of the equation since 2012 or so, where we've got these other guys that have been making it for decades and decades. So, they've been doing pretty good in the quality aspect and workmanship in the short time that they've been building cars. But there are a lot of creature comforts in the Model 3, and the good thing is that because it's software driven, a lot of things can be added as the car gets going, and features can be added through OTA.
Okay. You had the car for a number of hours, and you also had the ability to take it for a ride in Fremont earlier.
On the ride along, yes.
Right. Was there any glaring differences between your two experiences? Obviously, you were driving in one sense and you weren't in the other, but did you see any difference or improvement between the two rides that you had?
Not really. One thing that we both commented on was the fit and finish seemed to be really at par for what we experienced in the ride along at Fremont. We were quite impressed, kind of expecting some squeaks and rattles because it's early. Didn't have any of that. We did go down, some bumpy roads, some windy areas, and the car was very solidly built from that perspective. Everything was tight and everything was nice. So from that perspective, there wasn't really a different in the drive, in the experience that we had, other than more time.
And one other quick question I have is just kind of on a funny side of things is, from following this car that there are people out spotting this car all over the place, taking pictures, lying down in front of it, lying on the car itself.
There's a big paparazzi.
Did you have a paparazzi following when you had your car for your little test run?
If we did, we didn't see them. We were too busy trying to do our due diligence on the car. So, as you see the video, a lot of it is static. We're at locations where we're able to actually take our time and go through, do measurements, show different elements of the interior, of some of the builds, and then of course go through all the software elements and functions on the one screen that's there, to show people how to do your daily things like turn on your lights and your wipers. Those are, we actually were prepared with a large checklist that we actually got from viewers and from people wanting to know all these different questions. And we still probably have only answered about 50% of them, because after the video, we got a whole whack more. What about this? What about that? What about that? So, we can only do so much, but we tried to cover as much of the, if you're going to get in this car and go to work, what you need to know and how you need to operate your basic functionalities. That's what we wanted to show.
I'm just excited to hear that Tesla is installing turn signals.
Yes.
A lot of the higher end cars I see here in the Chicagoland area don't seem to have the turn signals. And
I noticed that. The arm kind of gets cold in the winter when it's out there trying to do your bicycle signals, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Area.
Very good. Very good. So with the testing that you did, or the going through a checklist, did you find, did anything jump out at you and surprise you in a positive or negative manner besides the build quality that you already mentioned?
Right.
Was there anything that really stuck out that you would like to comment on?
Yeah, the driving it's a very agile, nimble car to drive, as you would expect, I think, within that size class. Obviously, with the center of gravity being low and distributed because of the batteries, the handling is very well. The ride it's not a luxurious ride. They don't have air suspension in these, so you got your coilover shocks, struts scenario. You're going to feel some bumps like you would in a mid-sized car or of that class. But one thing that we were very taken aback by in a positive way was the quietness. It's a very quiet car. You really just hear the tires on the pavement, and of course the noise is different depending on the pavement structure. There's a slight little engine whine that you hear around 50 miles an hour as you're going up to speed, but that's typical with all electric cars that I've been in. I've been in a Leaf, a Kia EV, been in the e-Golf, been in pretty well everything else that's on the market today, except for the Mitsubishi, and they all have a little bit of a motor whine at some point throughout their throttle process. The Bolt as well, we've been in that. Good car. So I think that, but I remember getting in and drive going, wow, this is just really quiet. Like I talk very softly and I don't have to yell when we're in this car driving on at highway speed. It's extremely quiet and very comfortable from that perspective.
I think during the video you had shown a number of the like the doors and the trunk and the front. They all have this thick rubber membrane that I know Trevor was commenting on a few times during the video.
Yeah, Trevor was talking about the materials that they're soft touch materials. So we took the Bolt out during this year's Toronto Auto Show in February of this year, and we actually got a chance to actually go in around downtown Toronto and drive it, both of us, and we were pleasantly impressed with the car. Other than the fact that it's got a lot of plastic in the car. And, by looking at it, and I'm not discounting the Bolt at all, it's a great car. The mileage that the range you're getting out of it is fantastic. But again, it is a different vehicle than what the Model 3 is going to be. Even though it's a battery electric vehicle, it's still different for some of the reasons that I mentioned earlier about Tesla's value add. But the Bolt has a lot of plastics for a car of about 45,000 Canadian, 40 to 45,000 Canadian before incentives. Just the fit and finish is a little bit different than you find in the Tesla. So we wanted to go through and say, okay, if this is going to be a bit more of a premium, is it worth it in the materials and in the environment that you are in when you're into this vehicle? Yes, they're using premium materials, soft touch. The suede type materials as well for both the door lining and the head lining and things like that, which they could have cheaped out and used something else. So they did step it up a bit. The back of the front seats have a hard plastic for that, I guess, obviously to lessen scuffs and to take, weathering and, kids kicking the back of the seats and that kind of stuff when you have kids in there.
Let's not forget Elon has kids.
And Elon has kids. Yeah. So, all the latch stuff is there for kids, for car seats and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's well thought out and well appointed for a car of that price point.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good.
Nice. So we want to take this opportunity to remind everyone where they can see the video in its entirety.
Yeah, just Google Model 3 Owners Club. We're on YouTube. We should pop right up and you'll see that's our latest video that we put out. The last check that I looked at it earlier this afternoon, we were passing 450,000 views. So we're certainly getting some playtime, which is great. We knew that this was a very wanted video, that there have been some other videos out there and that there continue to be videos almost and photos, as you said earlier, Mark, about everybody, taking pictures of this car and videoing it all the time. So nothing of the depthness that we've done has been out yet, but some other companies have done some shorter videos of different elements, and we wanted to do it justice because we know the car, we understand Tesla a little better than some of the others that have been doing that out there. So we wanted to portray that and really go through it with a lot more detail than what's been done before. So
I believe one of the other the early ones was a gentleman who is running an auto detail shop.
Yes, that's right.
He's run a number of them.
Yep.
And like you said, it was almost like he was speaking from the side of, well, here's something new. Well, obviously he's done detailing of Teslas, but it wasn't, he didn't have a great amount of knowledge about the different pieces, what makes a Tesla a Tesla. But,
and it's great to get the information out there. It's great for people to see that. So we're certainly applauding them for doing that. It's just, if you're going to speak on a subject and you're going to make some descriptions about different elements of what you're speaking about, at least be somewhat informed about it, because you're not doing it justice. Probably some features that were being mentioned and talked about that maybe could have been described a little bit better or missing some information. That's all. But certainly, good job from that perspective. And you'll see tons more come out as well.
Oh yeah. As they start to roll out, I'm sure the internet will explode with them. Just like we saw the photographs running from just someone that was coming out of Tesla HQ now, and now people are stocking out grocery stores and libraries and everywhere else that the car happens to be found.
I think that'll start dwindling as, again, more are coming out, both more content and then more vehicles are being delivered as well. As Tesla is planning to do. They talked on their quarterly call just before we started about an exponential ramp up. So, from the 200 and so that they delivered last quarter, exponentially ramping that up into the thousands per week by the end of this year. There wasn't a hard fixed number because Elon, that's the way he is. But certainly, it's a huge ramp up that they're trying to do, even though they are behind in their forecasting schedule.
I'm just curious. There's been a lot of talk about the quality of the body panels and how everything fits. I mean, you guys spent an hour on the video, more than an hour.
Yes.
Detailing every part of this car. What was your impression that the early criticisms of the Model 3 body panels, some of the paintwork, did that seem consistent with what you saw and the one you saw, or off base?
I think the one that we saw seemed to be fairly solid from a fit and finish and a build perspective and a paint. I mean, We had some bugs on the front of it because it was driven, so didn't have a chance to detail the car. But from the fit and finish, the paint, everything seemed really well done. I know some people argue about the gaps. To me, I didn't think any body panel gaps were anything out of the ordinary from that perspective. And again, there wasn't anything that seemed to be too misaligned. I think one viewer mentioned some of the one run of the chrome might have been a little off, but I didn't notice it. So again, these are still early production cars, so they're not betas. They are, they're cars that are getting delivered that people are buying, and you might have some small imperfections, but nothing that we noticed that was glaring at us.
Because these cars are actually, they're being delivered to investors and investors and employees at this point. We know that the transition is going to happen pretty close to now, where it's going to go outside of that envelope. But it would be interesting to see that, because of course you've got an audience that is very pro Tesla, and if there are any issues with the car, they are bringing it up to Tesla so that they can correct items before it goes outside of that group of people.
Yeah, and for the most part, other than what they've announced as far as some condensation in some of the tail lights, some initial, I think, either welds in the battery pack or bolts or something like that. There were some initials, some seat issues. They've had a few changes. Other than some very early stuff, most of the issues have been dealt with. Now, what they talked about on the quarterly call was just some of the issues, again, dealing with the battery pack, with volume in battery pack production. That's kind of where the majority of the bottleneck that we're experiencing or hearing Tesla talk about is coming from. It's the Gigafactory, and it's Elon went into some details on the call about that, but that's for the most part where things are happening. The problem with Tesla is they're as fast as their slowest part can be manufactured. So there's roughly 10,000 unique parts in a Model 3, and if part number 9,999 can't be made 1,000 times a week for 1,000 cars, then that's it can only be made 500. Then that's the highest they can ramp up. It's that kind of how you equate it. So they're struggling with some of those, but they are making big strides and continuing to build. I think he didn't really mention a number, but they were talking about welding in the call, and that they're welding, these frames, like lots of them every day. So they are continuing to pump out cars as we speak every day, and continue to deliver these cars a lot more out there. So
now, can we touch on you mentioned the welding, and I thought this was rather interesting that they're welding steel in the Model 3 as compared to the aluminum that the S and the X were made of.
Yeah, there's if you've had a chance to look at the emergency responders guide, it actually kind of gives a good overview of some of the high strength areas within the Model 3. There's a mix of different strength areas, but yeah, they are using a mix of steel and aluminum. Aluminum obviously to save weight, and steel to add more rigidity and structural integrity in the areas that matter. And plus, steel's cheaper than aluminum. So I think they're coming into this with a mixed approach. Again, the Model 3 has been designed from the start to be a high volume, mass manufactured car. At 35,000 base plus 9,000 for long range plus premium, you're well into the 50,000 US. I wouldn't say that's a mass market car. I'd say something around 25,000 is a mass market car, but certainly a mass produced car on Tesla scale. For when they're talking about building, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of these a year at some point. So that's how they've designed the car, and they've incorporated elements like steel and aluminum mixtures and alloys to lower the price and be able to manufacture it easier and quicker. That makes sense?
Yeah. It's a really good explanation.
Thanks. Good. Yeah, you're welcome.
You just made it up on the fly, didn't you?
I did. Just ask me again, you get a different answer. Yeah. I don't remember what
I'd like to know what you think about steel versus aluminum now.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of economizing measures, one of the things that Tesla has done with the Model 3 is to, and I hate to use this word, forgive me, but go to some extreme measures to reduce the number of parts, not only the expensive materials, but the actual number of materials.
Yes.
It's certainly a brilliant move in the sense that it's easier to produce and obviously less expensive. So there may be some profit margin in there. So I'm wondering, from a driver's perspective, you had this car for a few hours during the day, during the night. It rained.
Yeah.
How is it controlling the wipers? Was there anything control wise inside the vehicle that you thought, well, maybe they could have put a button there?
You know, that's probably the number one question we get asked either by email or on the forums and on the channel is all those kind of functions. Oh, you know, taking your eyes off to turn the wipers on is ludicrous. You know, it's distracted driving and blah, blah, blah. All this stuff. It really took us a very minimal amount of time to get comfortable with the controls, literally a couple of minutes. What I bring to the show is I'm not a Tesla owner. Neither of us, Trevor and I, are Tesla owners. Trevor's been following Tesla a lot longer than I have. So he's much more knowledgeable from an engineering and a mechanical standpoint and things like that, features. I come from an average consumer. That's just, hey, I'm thinking about electrification. Here in Ontario, we've got a really good incentive deal going on. So that kind of woke me up about a year or so ago saying, what do you mean I can get some free money from the government? Let me look into this. And Mark knows what I'm talking about. So these things kind of got me into it. So when I got into that car, I'm picturing, okay, I'm getting in the car and I'm going to go to work, and you know, how easy is it to operate and drive this vehicle? And within a matter of a couple of minutes, it was very intuitive to learn the controls. You know, fix your driver profile, lock that in so the steering wheel is at the right point, your seats are at the right point, and that's all saved. The good thing about the driver profiles is it saves all your screen selections as well. Anything you've customized and settings that you've done, things from auto on the headlights or auto lock the car, those are all saved as part of your driver profile. So it's not just the steering wheel and seats. It's a lot more items, so that when you get into it and you put in your name as your driver, it will set everything up the way you like it. So it was real easy. I mean, you know, wipers, there is a stock button for the wipers to start them. Again, as we showed in the video, there's a part of the screen that comes out when you activate the wipers, and then you touch that to keep them going. And the distance on that screen, it doesn't really show well on videos or in pictures, because it does look a bit intimidating. Like, I got to reach all the way over. It's actually very close. You really hardly have to lean over to engage that screen. And I think it'll be like anything. I was thinking about this today, that, you know, I got to change radio stations or up the volume. And yeah, I have some steering wheel buttons, but half the time I go and turn the knob because I'm lazy or whatever. I just do that. So we get into these, you know, muscle memory type of elements where we get familiar with the controls and we do it, and we don't think about it. We just do it. And that's the same with the Model 3. The controls are very intuitive and very straightforward. I think once people sit in it and learn it and spend a few minutes, they won't have these objections about having to do things like turn on lights and the wipers and the HVAC and things like that. It's very easy to do.
Now, here's something. Yeah, David in the chat room actually brought up a really good point. And I don't know that anyone has had an opportunity to experience this yet. Certainly, you all will in Canada, probably coming up very shortly. But the question is about access to the charge ports and the door handles that pop out. And how do you keep those, or how does Tesla keep those from freezing up?
Yeah, the handles are more like on a hinge mechanism. So you have to push in the J. So you have to push in on one end for the other to pop out. I mean, obviously we haven't experienced the vehicle in winter climates. Yeah, you know, we get you know, -20, -30 C days here in the Ontario, Toronto region, you know, which would be below 0 Fahrenheit for you guys. So we do get some cold, and I mean, freezing rain is freezing rain. So if you're into freezing ice, that's a whole different ballgame. Nothing really out there is going to do it. But for your normal winter, I don't see any issues with these, because it's a mechanism. You push in one end, the other pops out. I don't see that freezing up from that perspective. But the proof will be once some of these deliveries in northern climates happen and people start experiencing. Tesla knows this, though. I mean, they've had a Model 3 in New Zealand, New Zealand or Australia, one of the two, for a while for winter testing, and also I believe in Norway or Sweden. So they know that a lot of their cars are going to go to these northern climates. We know that Canada, as well as a lot of the other European countries like Norway, Sweden, Scandinavians are very much EV adopters, so that there's a lot of Teslas already there. So they thought about, the engineering behind that. So I don't see that as being an issue, but that's more of a wait and see. We couldn't really replicate anything at the point in time that we had.
All right.
And another thing that comes into play there is what's been early released with the Model 3 is that all these cars are rear-wheel drive currently.
Correct.
So the early people that are going to buy these cars are going to be getting a rear-wheel drive car, similar to what Ken and I probably and the rest of you have driven earlier in our lives. There were only rear-wheel drive cars really on the road, and we used to have a great time with them in Canada. It's fishtailing up and down the roads like it was part of a sport for a young man to have a rear-wheel drive car in the winter. It was quite fun. So it'll be interesting to see how many adopt that or wait for the all-wheel drive to come out.
Yeah, that's another good point you bring up, Mark, and a question we get a lot of: should I hold out for all-wheel drive, or should I go with our rear-wheel? Because I do live in a snowy climate. There's a lot of Tesla owners, both on the S and the X, that have single motor rear-wheel drive vehicles, and they don't have any problems winter driving. Because, again, the weight of the vehicles, these are heavier than normal ICE vehicles from a weight perspective, the low center of gravity, and making darn sure that you have a good set of winter tires. You can't expect to go on all seasons and be able to chug through any amounts of snow. So I think a combination of those features help the current rear-wheel drives get through most normal winter climates. I mean, if it's a really big snowfall, if you're getting 6, 10, 12, 15 inches of snow, 30, 40 centimeters in it, then, unless you have an SUV or a high clearance vehicle, it's going to be problematic anyway. So those are considerations you have to do. But I personally, I don't think I'm going to get a all-wheel drive. I think I'll be fine with the rear wheel. It depends on what cost. We have no idea what costing is going to be, so we can just analyze what they charge currently for the S and extrapolate that to the Model 3. And Trevor's done some information there. So I'm still kind of on the fence whether or not I need that. I've had front-wheel drive for almost ever. I've never had an all-wheel drive vehicle. It's either been rear or front. I like front in the winter because I just pull the stick and do donuts in parking lots. It's nice and easy that way. So I'm going to miss the handbrake thing, but what can you do? New experience. I think these things are going to be a little hard to throw it around, but not impossible because they do have a lot of torque. So,
and I like that you mentioned the lower center of gravity. Mm-hmm. I think what also helps is that it's a better distribution of weight.
Correct.
When I was a kid with rear wheel drive vehicles, we threw sandbags in the trunk
or concrete blocks or something.
To put weight over the wheel so they got traction because of course the internal combustion engine is up front and so that throws it off. But with the battery being so well distributed across the bottom, I do think that there would be a better traction on the rear tires.
Great observation, Tony, and as well that the electric motor is actually over the rear wheels as well, like an analogy of the engine over the front wheels in a front wheel drive car. So you do have more weight on those rear wheels as well as the battery weight that you just mentioned. So for folks that are not familiar with battery electric vehicles and that skateboard design, as we've talked about, or that you may have heard about in a lot of manufacturers have picked up on that is a different driving experience. So it might not be fair to compare a rear-wheel drive Model 3, versus an all-wheel drive Audi or something, because again, as you mentioned, the weight and the torque and the handling characteristics are so much different that it may handle surprisingly more well than people think in winter climates.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But Trevor, I believe, has driven one. I know he's driven one in the rain. I'm not sure if he's taken an S out in the snow, but again, we talk to a lot of owners that are at local clubs and on chat, and we look at the forums and stuff, and we don't see a really big complaint about rear wheel versus all-wheel drive, unless it's a very heavy snow area that, you know, northern Canada into the Arctic or something like that. Then you've got some different issues.
That's when you just Netflix and chill.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And one further question about your drive. Did you have a chance to actually run the battery down quite a bit? Did you get to see? Okay, so it was a short amount of driving then, really.
Short amount of driving. We were impressed again with the full fully charged battery range. I mean, it's pushing 300 miles or just over 300 miles. So it's almost 500 kilometers. So, you know, that's a game changer when you look at the price point versus the range. And that's one of the things we've always talked about with the Model 3 specifically is that, and Trevor used this quote a while ago, and I always quote him, is that the Model 3 is kind of the iPhone moment for battery electric vehicles. You know, the iPhone changed the mobile phone, cellular phone marketplace. It shifted everything quite substantially. And now that's just a standard, right? We all see smartphones today, and that's kind of a flip phone would be, what do you got a flip phone for? You know, that's kind of archaic. And we believe the Tesla 3 is doing the same thing to the electric vehicle marketplace. It's, you know, it's a 200-mile plus club, as I call it. Those are kind of table stakes now for range. You know, you've got to have the driving characteristics and range to handle at least that. Unique quick charging times. Infrastructure is becoming much more predominant in the next, you know, there's such a huge push worldwide for charging infrastructure that in the next 5 to 10 years, we will see charging infrastructure almost as predominant as gas stations. And that experience from a time perspective will shorten as well. Maybe not 5 minutes to put gas in your tank, but certainly maybe 15 minute experience versus a 30-minute or longer experience, depending on what you're charging. So,
but even then, on a day-to-day use, most people will just top off their battery at home overnight.
Yeah, you got it. Your garage is your gas station, as I like to say. So, you know, you charge your phone at home pretty well overnight. It's the same experience with your BEV. That you get up in the morning, you've got a full charge, and off you go. And the Model 3, we were quite happy with the range that it's getting on that long range version, and that, you know, almost 500 kilometers is beyond my expectations. I did not expect that, so that was pretty good.
So at any point, you can wake up with your new car and drive to Montreal. Just on a single charge.
Pretty well, almost. We'd have to eke it out a little bit with a tailwind, but yeah.
That's amazing. Amazing amount of range.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, it's quite a substantial car. And again, you know, I mentioned some of Tesla's value added, and I'm not a salesman for Tesla. I'm just I'm in sales in a completely different sector. But I do kind of recognize value in products, and certainly Tesla has the value it's more software than hardware in a lot of cases, right? The cars come with a lot of hardware elements, but as I mentioned earlier at the show, that they change and get better with time because there's a lot of software, and then they can update that automatically through their own. You wake up in the morning and you've got some new features that you didn't have yesterday. And also their value with the supercharging. They still have a lead in that value. Other vendors are catching up, but they're not putting a lot of emphasis there. I don't see Nissan really going heavy into the ultra fast charging. It's third parties. And you have to remember the charger is actually in the car itself. It's not what you're connecting it to is just a plug. And it's nice to talk about, you know, DC fast chargers and being able to do, you know, 350 kilowatt charging and things like that. But if the car has only got a 7.7 or 14, then that's all it's going to do. The hose is only so big to pump electrons through. And Tesla still has a unique advantage where they're typically three times faster than anybody else on the market today from a charging perspective with their superchargers out there that they continue to expand on. So there's a competitive advantage there. That won't last forever, but it's certainly there today.
We're kind of running out of time, and I want to just quickly touch on the earnings call that happened today.
For sure.
If you want to just from your perspective, since you listened, I didn't listen to the call.
Yeah.
I read Twitter, which isn't the same as actually listening.
Everything I learned in life, I learned from Twitter. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the numbers and stuff because that's not why I listen. But from a Model 3 perspective, the points that I found out were that, again, they restated the fact that the Model 3 has been designed for mass manufacturing. So the car itself is not difficult to build. The problems they've had, as I mentioned and have been in a couple of areas from a bottlenecking perspective, one of those being in the battery, a battery build at the Gigafactory. They talked about zones, and I won't get into details on what, I don't even know what some of that stuff is, but that's where they talk some of the slowdowns are. So that's really where the primary constraint's been. So they're basically, I think you guys have all heard that their original projections to ramp up the Model 3 were projected to be 5,000 a week by the end of this year.
Yeah.
They've now pushed that out a quarter. So they've said, now we anticipate that 5,000 a week ramp. We expect to hit that near the end of the first quarter of calendar year 2018. So sometime in March.
Near the because for some reason I had heard that is the end of 2018.
No, sorry, the first quarter, first calendar quarter 2018. Elon said, sometime in March. So whatever he says, put it to the end. So if he says March, put it to March 31st, right? Just put it to the end of the month. So by the end of the first quarter next year, they hope to be ramped up to 5,000 units a week in a build of the Model 3. If they hit that, then obviously they should be able to start coming out with some other options, like maybe Allwheel and maybe the lower cost, a shorter range vehicle as well. They didn't talk about that, but they are keen to get all that ramped up. And that was one number that stuck out, was pushing that. And with the 10,000 then per week, which is what their next goal was, they were undefined on when they thought they would hit that. They're hoping for some time in calendar year 2018, but they weren't able to put a stake in the ground and kind of say, we think by July or August or November. So that's a floating target right now.
Yeah, I've worked with marketing enough to know that they will tell you that the product is going to ship in a month.
Yeah,
but they won't tell you which one.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think Elon has great intentions, but I've learned that whatever he says, just take it for 10% value. I think the intent is there, but the reality is there's so many complexities, and he used the term processes that are involved in making a car that you can't control it all, even if you insource so much of it. Things are going to happen. On the plus note, they did pass the 250,000 mark for Tesla deliveries worldwide. So that's all vehicles worldwide, and that's a milestone for them. Considering that only 5 years ago they had sold 5,000 or 2,500 cars. So in 5 years they've done a quantum leap in the number of sales. And when you look at that, Elon had mentioned that that's faster than the Model T ramp up as well, which was one of the fastest ramp ups in automobile history, the Ford Model T. So that's kind of what I got out of that call. They also mentioned that reservations continue to grow for the Model 3, but they didn't obviously put a number to that. But I think we all know that it's well over 500,000 and potentially climbing. And they talked about, just trying to think what else. I don't know if you remember that Elon said at one of the events, I don't know if it was a launch event or prior to that, they wanted to do a coast-to-coast automated drive to show their level of autonomy. They mentioned that they still want, that they're progressing rapidly towards that goal, but there's no date there. So I find it highly unlikely that they're going to do something before the end of this year.
Do you think it could be an automated cannonball run?
Could be.
Oh, it'll be a cannonball run.
Put it on a flatbed and off you go. And then they also, they continue to grow the supercharger. The China plant is a 3-year thing away, that kind of stuff. Nothing till 2019. And those were some of the things. And that Model 3s, the initial Model 3s will not be able to lease. So they're only a purchase or a finance availability for the foreseeable future until leasing comes back. So for those who are thinking of leasing, you may have to wait a while. But we're waiting for our 3s for a while anyway. Personally, I don't expect Canadian deliveries to come until, I was looking at the end of next year, but with this push out, it could slip into early 2019. We'll have to see.
All right.
That would not be good for people that are waiting, will it? You've been on a list for a long time, even from day one, and you're certainly hoping that the best happens so that you can get your car as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And when you hear about things about delays and shortcomings, it certainly is a little bit disheartening sitting from the outside.
Absolutely is. And I think, I don't know if we'll get a large number of reservations drop off. I mean, that's always a threat that That could happen. It's a little early, but that is something that Tesla needs to be cognizant of. They have an opportunity right now that they need to deliver on, and the more of these delays, they could lose some of that opportunity and edge. But I think a lot of people are going to hang out. I myself am not in a situation where I'm in a hurry to change cars, but I know people are on leases, or people have cars that may not last another year or so that they want to get rid of. So there are some decisions that may need to be made earlier for some folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Kenneth, thank you so much for coming on. And
Thank you for having me. Wow, we're done. That's an hour already.
That's an hour.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, you guys are fast and furious.
Yeah, well, definitely furious. I don't know about fat.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And certainly encourage viewers to check out our forum, the Model 3 Owners Club forum. There's a lot of conversations going on, 10,000 plus members there, plus our YouTube channel. We continue to do episodes, and we'll do more stuff. We're hoping to do follow-up video, in-depth looks at the car later, in the future, probably more driver-oriented than looking around it at some point in time. Might have to wait for the winter to pass before that to get some better weather, and we'll go from there. Yeah, but thank you.
Well, you can definitely look for Kenneth at model3ownersclub.com. That's model 3, the numeral, ownersclub.com. And from there, there's links to the videos, the forum, all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
my Twitter is at Kenneth Bocor, so you can't miss that one as well. But Trevor's kind of he's the more Twitter guy. I hang out a little bit and try to do what I can. But,
Can I have a shirt?
There are some cool shirts, right? You got to ask Trevor. He manages the store. He's all about the store as well. So
you can buy a shirt, Tony.
You can gladly buy a shirt.
I'm sure I could. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't keep inventory. It's all just in time. So keep those costs down.
No promo shirts here, Mr. Sponging.
Sorry, guys.
You don't want to be a sponsor of this show? Come on, we're so desperate for sponsors.
I'll take it up with my boss. Yeah.
Hey, that's an sales pitch, by the way, telling someone you're desperate.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. End of quarter, please help me out.
You're not in sales. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well, Kenneth, this is the time we reserve for plugs. We kind of already did, but again, anything else you want to plug or some sites you want to mention?
No, I mean, just I encourage folks that are thinking about electrification to do some research. There's a lot of good options out there. So we know Tesla, of course, has some great products, but if there are others that maybe don't have the financial strength to get into that or want something sooner in what they can afford, there are some viable options. Leaf 2.0 is coming out next year. In North America, it's getting some good reviews, so check out some of the other stuff. But just keep watching. Every day is more information on Tesla and the Model 3 and things going on there.
Absolutely. Well, Kenneth, thank
you.
Tony, any plugs this week?
Hey, I want to take a moment for our sponsors, and then I want to thank David, JT, and Ken for being in the chat with me. It's always great to have people joining us. Absolutely. So thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Mr. Coughlin, bring it home.
Well, through the week, we didn't have much to share with this news-wise because we took up so much time talking about the Model 3, rightfully so. But please follow us on Twitter at The Tesla Life, as well as our Facebook feed, which is The Tesla Life #1. And you'll see us update that throughout the week. So join in there and follow us and keep up with the news.
And as I like to say, search the Tesla Life Show. Look for our friendly red logo. Subscribe there. That way you're notified automatically when we post new news or new shows.
Absolutely.
Kenneth, thank you once again for coming on and spending an hour just, giving us the in-depth. That was really cool.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it a lot. Yep.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Tony and Mark, do I have to thank you guys? Because I do.
Not really. Not really.
Guys, as always. Now, play nice. And of course, thanks all of you for watching or listening. We appreciate you. Tune in next week and find out what is new and exciting in the Tesla life. And we'll see you then.